Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you. And this is really an honor to be presenting here at NASA iTech. It's been an awesome week, and I've really enjoyed everything. As Tom said, my name is Jim Smoot. I earned my doctorate in microbiology, and for the last 13 years, I've been working in the biofuel sector. And today, I'm going to be pitching BBB as a fuel to help clean up diesel emissions. So what is BBB? BBB is my shorthand for butyl butoxybutryate, which is an ester ether molecule, and it has good fuel properties. It is immediately mixable with and compatible with today's diesel infrastructure, and with the being an ether, it has good NOx and particulate matter emissions profiles. So with that, and a key feature I'll talk in a little bit, there's a clear go-to market strategy for this molecule, for this product. It is a biofuel, and the pathway shown up above is the production pathway. It's been scrubbed as hard as I can for cost, because cost is what kills biofuel. And so the main takeaways in this slide is that there are two fermentations and a chemical transformation. The first fermentation is the same fermentation basically as in anaerobic digestion. It's just instead of forming biogas, the intermediate carbon product is taken up into a second fermentation, which this is my big innovation and pitch here today, is that this fermentation is with an organism that has just been recently put into isolation, and I want to be making it into a novel chassis microbe. It's a champion at taking up this and outcompeting its microbial community to and dominating a microbial community. It's fascinating. It can in industrial wastewater, it can become 85% of the community, which is just phenomenal. It also is either the top or top two as far as being able to accumulate biopolymer. So it is a really great naturally adapted organism for an industrial fermentation system. The engineering that it would do with this organism is basically taking genetic circuits that have been identified and described through teams in academia, particularly Cal and UC Davis, and producing the second intermediate that has to go through then a chemical transformation to form BBB. Another part of this is to look to see if we can't do some synthetic biology. I've identified the enzyme, but we need to do the basic, can we get that enzyme to basically cut out these two steps and just go from here right into BBB. So it's an open question. It's definitely a TRL1 question, but if we can do that, we can cut out about 25% of the process cost that I have in this. So it's worth looking into. The other thing I want to point out for the folks in NASA is that this part of the process is flexible. And so when what we wire into the genetics can be other things besides BBB intermediate. It can be nutraceuticals or other food type products, which as we go towards colonizing the solar system, we're going to have autonomous colonies. So they're going to have to be able to produce their own fuel, their own food, the fertilizers that need to go into that food. They're going to need to be able to recycle their water, the nutrients. This process we can build into a closed loop type system so that we can do that in wherever we may end up being in the solar system. But back here on Earth, why here, why now? California. and the California Energy Commission and the California Air Resources Board in early this year, January this year, mandated that biodiesel producers who are selling in the state reduce their NOx and particulate matter emissions. And to do that, they basically mandated that you add some kind of oxygenate so that the overall blended product has fuel emissions that are basically less than plus or minus some or plus some error in the testing, but basically against the reference fuel. And so there is now a regulatory market demand for diesel oxygenates in California starting in 2018. So that's why it's here and now. The nice thing from a startup standpoint is that California recognizes that this is not an easy thing to do to commercialize. And I'm going to give up on trying to point things out. And it allows sales to go on as you go through and develop the certification process. So why California? Why California-centric? California is the 5th largest economy in the world right now. Depending upon the economic conditions, it goes from 5th to 8th, but right now we're in good times, so we're in 5th. It has a 3 billion gallon a year demand for diesel, which is, from the United States perspective, about 6% of the total 54 billion gallons of diesel demand. The customer for this are biodiesel producers who are interested in the California market and selling into that market. And there are a lot, because the California market in and of itself is not producing it's enough fuel, renewable fuel to meet LCSF, low carbon fuel standard requirements. So product is being imported from Asia, so it's being shipped in, or by rail from the Midwest. And the Midwest, that's the key for the value proposition to this. And this slide, this map is taken from the latest billion-ton biomass report from DOE, and it shows that there is the vast majority of available biomass for biotransformations into bioproducts is in the Midwest and in rural areas. And so, the USDA, the biology programs at DOE all recognize that rural economic development and growth and resilience and renaissance are with a bio-based economy. So that's really good news for a lot of folks. And we have the chance to lead in that. We have a chance. We're ahead right now for as far as BBB, because there's only U.S. is doing it. That's me and some other folks that I worked with before, but basically it's me now. So there are folks in Asia who are working on an inferior fuel product, but have the general idea for the underlying technology. So the backbone technology of making this product, there are groups in Asia that are doing that and have done it and will continue to do it. They will figure it out. It'll take them time, but it's a win. It's not an if type of proposition. So we are in a bit of a race. There are technical challenges. It's not an easy thing to identify a scalable, cost-effective pathway, because there are a lot of pathways, but a lot of them lead you down some really bad rabbit holes. And the landscape, for patent IP landscape for this, goes from biopolymers to just general synthetic biology. So there is a lot of IP to be able to navigate and to understand who owns what, who's no longer in the market, where that IP has landed. There's a couple people who are accumulating IP, let's put it that way, and then but not doing much with it these days. And then the other issue, it's a known issue in the biofuels world. The Asian folks, groups, they all know it, that if you're going to use traditional feedstocks, conventional fermentation methods, you're not going to get the economics needed to meet the commodity prices that we're at to compete. So you really have to be thinking outside the box and stretching the box and envelope for being able to produce product in a competitive way. So to that end, this slide is pretty much where the biofuels industry is today. I think there's a general understanding is that you have to seek early revenue, and that means going after smaller markets but are more valuable markets so that you can de-risk, prove out your technology, do the scale up in a rational way. Don't go for the 100 million gallon a year plate, $100 million, $200 million plant right away and then sink yourself in debt. That you step through these things, and that is how you can fill in and build bridges across valleys of death. And then also, because of that, the business model ends up being tailored to the opportunity. So depending upon what market you're going after, there's going to be different opportunities, there's going to be different players. So to make this a reality, I basically broke this down into a two-phase development plan. Phase one, the earlier stage TRLs. Phase two, we can wait later for collaborating with folks at Cal and LBNL for a larger stage bioreactor type of situation. But so the first objective, it's the meat of it. It's getting that engineering, those genetic circuits that are in E. coli, and there are productivities that are decent, particularly out of a lab in UC Davis. They're doing pretty well. We'll get those genes into this organism that can grow on that feedstock, because the folks at UC Davis use sugar, and sugar's just a non-starter for me. And so do that first thing. The second one is to identify a better, and when I say better, it's cost. I'm not wedded to trying to do a synthetic biology project. I just look at that and going, if I can get the yield and productivity equivalent to what I can do with that intermediate, I save myself about a quarter of my process cost. On the flip side, that chemical transformation is well understood, and I mean very well understood by the petrochemical industry. So there's the best of the 1950s and 60s technology that we can rely on for that chemical transfer. So it's not a technical challenge per se, but it's just getting that on board with these particular molecules. And then the third objective would be to do basically a skid type of pilot to get system integration. The timeline, basically it's a 2-year project. I've staggered them. The main thing here, I'm going to try to get back to this, is that this is a go, no go, so that if we can get there, great, we can move on with objective 3. If not, we can no go and go back to the drawing board. So the resources that are needed, basically to do this, get some business development folks on board, get some engineering technical folks on board, a CFO who knows and understands the landscape of financing for biofuels and bioproducts, because that's a special area, and then the scale up, the Advanced Biofuels Process Development Unit, that's what they're there for, is to take that kind of smaller scale stuff and bring it into filling this room with bioreactor type size stuff. So they'd be a good phase 2 development partner. High seas, this is back to the NASA. This is a land-based, earth-based simulation project and out on Mauna Loa, and it would be great to be able to partner with them. And then the ask is $1.3 million just to get the process going. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
much BBB do you need in for say, a 10-gallon tank filling up? How much? I'm just trying to get a feeling for the scale up of how much you need to make.
So the blend ratio, because you would blend it, you wouldn't, I mean, BBB in and of it's, you're not going to replace diesel, it's going to blend with.
You're going to add some. I'm just trying to get a feeling for how much of the BBB you actually need to make in order to make an impact, to have a market.
Well, oh, you mean for the
Right.
Interesting question. Enough to be able to sustain your revenue. I mean, it's basically to create enough revenue. Or you mean how much to? Sorry, maybe I misunderstood. For CARB to certify? Because basically we're looking at probably from a blend ratio, 10 to 20% with BBB of diesel. So on a 10-gallon, you're looking at a gallon to 2 gallons of BBB to get the NOx and PM down nicely.
So you need to make a lot, is what it is.
Yeah, it's fuel.
Okay.
I mean, it's liquid transportation fuel. It's a huge area. So but I mean, from the certification process, that's why I said they allow multiple things. So you can be making gallons, tens of gallons, hundreds of gallons, and getting that sold and testing it with engines to demonstrate the certification.
What are competing approaches to meeting these California standards, right? So
Yes.
Specific BBB approach, but what
So-
are other additives or?
So I've seen two additives so far. Well, okay, I'll backtrack. I've seen 2 additives for sure. There's a third one that just got certified late last week. It's got some weird proprietary digits to it, so I'm not sure if it's just another one of the same 2 I'm about to say, or if it's actually a third product. But they're both cetane boosters for diesel. One is a peroxide, diterbutyl peroxide, and then the other one is an octyl nitrate. So people put it in as special proprietary whatever. You look at it as a chemist, you go, oh, you've got an octyl nitrate. It might be some isomer of octyl nitrate, but you've got octyl nitrate. So both of those are traditional diesel cetane boosters. What I'd love to see, and I haven't yet seen, is how those 2 molecules sit in California heat with biodiesel. I haven't quite seen those kind of compatibilities because both of those have some potential reactivity to them, but they're not my product, so we'll let and see what happens there. But yeah, they're again from a hydrocarbon. They were hydrocarbon cetane boosters, is where they're historically been found.
Yeah, you kind of touched on that. What is the stability of this particular molecule? And also, are you at a state where you've identified a particular metabolic pathway? It's just not a particularly optimal one, or?
So it's, okay, so you had 2 questions. The first one, stability. A related compound we did the stability analysis on, it's basically so these are butyls, the ethyl version of those, so alkoxyalkanoate. It's a sweet spot. It doesn't break down easily, but it's not MTBE. It will break down in the environment, and so there is a degradation pathway for it. So,
But like, can you keep this in a tank?
yes, that's my point. It is stable in that short fuel perspective time frame, but from an environmental standpoint, it does have a breakdown of weeks to months. And then the second question was, pathway. So yeah, so like I said, this is a polymer boss. It really can do its job well. Basically, I'm going to interrupt that polymer pathway because the first 2 steps in that metabolic pathway are shared. It's then interrupting that and then going and producing the intermediate. So, and those genetic circuits, those are what I'm saying. Investigators at Cal, investigators at UC Davis have identified that circuitry. So it's not that I'm going out and finding them. I'm just repositioning them, redesigning for this organism so that it can take that intermediate 1 carbon compound and bring it right in. Because like I said, it's a champ at doing that. It really is.
Have you already done that for EBB?
No, this is all design. This is where it's designed. I want to also say that bug was the microorganism was isolated in 2014. So anytime before 2014, we really wouldn't have had this kind of candidate organism to do that from an industrial wastewater process. I've gotten it into the pathway at JGI, so it is on its way to being sequenced, or it's got a draft sequence ready. So we have the genetic background, and I'm teaming up with some other microbiologists to get a high fidelity genetic information. So we'll have that background, so we can do that kind of work.
2 questions. One, I know you're still developing the exact process, but do you have a sense of the integrated energy input compared to output? How does the energy balance work out?
So the fermentation process. Yeah, okay. I have not worked on that. I know where you're going. I understand where you're going. I have not done that kind of energy mass combination balance. So, and particularly off the top of my head, I'm not going to be able to do it. So.
Okay. The other question, you had talked about potentially doing this on site in space. Do you have a sense of the size and weight of what this system would be? So if you took it up in space with you, so you could make biofuel. Well,
you don't. You make it there, right? So I mean the pond system and whatnot. I mean NASA already has these things there. 1 gram of microbes is about 1 trillion little cell factories. Okay. So that's what you take up, and then you start doing your mining of water. The nutrient, it's a prototroph, so which means basically you can just feed it minerals and a carbon source. It doesn't need any kind of and the minerals in the Mars soil analysis that I looked up real quick. They're all there. I mean, you look at what folks use to isolate it. Everything's there. The big question, and the question is, where's the nitrogen on Mars? And so that'll be a question is what kind of. But as far as recycling, I mean, that recycling the nitrogen and from food, we will end up growing crops there in some way, shape, or form. So, which, by the way. A little bit off topic, but I love the talks about the whole ag, because I think this colonization, the technologies that are being developed for the colonization for food, are going to just revolutionize that Midwest biodiet. This is going to be the amount of money that farmers are going to be able to make with the technologies that are being developed for the colonization. Sorry, I'm going to put on my other hat. I'm a 5th generation farm guy from the Midwest, and one of the key problems is basically it's a revenue density issue. How can you make more money on a per given whatever? I was loving yesterday's presentation, because I put the pieces together. It was that's what I've been looking for. So, because there's a whole cellular ag, and that's a whole nother section. But cellular ag is hot as far as a investment section in San Francisco, and they need to bring down their costs, and the technologies that can be done for the human colonization things, they marry up well. So as we move forward with that, we're going to bring those costs, we're going to bring those into farms so that you can now intensify, and what I mean by intensify, the monetization of that product that you're getting. So I love it. I really
So-
appreciate the talks. Sorry, and I
No,
digressed
no,
away
that's
from
good. So Jim, I think you're at a bit of a disadvantage relative to maybe some of the subject matter experts in the room, because I don't know what a cellular egg is about.
a cellular what?
What were you talking about?
Cellular agriculture.
Agriculture. Okay, I got it.
Cellular agriculture. It's,
Okay.
I was at a salon.
But I just Googled cellular egg, because
Yeah, I heard you, I think you were saying cellular ag, and none of us, that's not something we're familiar with. No, that's okay. I just think it puts you at a disadvantage, because I think there's a lot more of things that will benefit you to be able to converse with people who know more about that stuff. So that's one thing. So you're talking about, in general, I mean, there's this is about liquid fuel in particular. You're seeing applications likely potentially for colonization of Mars.
Right.
And actually, I think Ramona's kind of an expert on some of that agricultural stuff on Mars. So you might do well to either
Right, so-
listen and learn. So I think that's a good thing. A question I have is, like, do we have any idea if we start putting this fuel into our engines and over time, what it does to the infrastructure of the, I mean, someone's going to worry about whether or not this kind of stuff is going to have a different effect on the hardware that they
Of
have.
the engine.
The actual engine.
Oh,
yes.
yeah, no,
System.
that's an excellent question, because it's a huge issue for, I'll go back to the ag business thing. Well, actually, you can do trucks too. You put a new product in, you just bought a couple $100,000 Cummins engine, you've just now broken your warranty by putting in an uncertified product. It's not a new issue. It's for this product. It's called VITEC, but basically it's changing the O-rings. So it's about a $400 job.
Yeah.
On the-
And the insurance industry is going to want to understand it as well, right? I mean, there's some implications that, yeah. It might just be the seals, and that makes sense to me, but if it breaks down over time, I understand the statement about storing it in a tank and understanding viability, but if you have a whatever it is, a truck that's been shut down for a while, hasn't operated in a while, and this is in the system somewhere, does it separate? Does it no longer work as fuel, and does it mess up the engine?
So the other generation, the ethyl product, is the one we have more data on. This was a second generation thing I did. EEB blended well at 50% with diesel and did not separate.
Okay.
This is a more hydrophobic. Obviously, it's got more butyl, so it's more of a diesel compatible.
Should be better.
Should be better.
And what about freezing temperatures?
It's an ether, and so the EEB's cloud point was at like minus. What did I do? I put it in a minus 80, and it didn't freeze.
Oh, that should do it.
And so this is a butyl, so it's a little bit bigger, right? A little bit clumsier, but it's an ether. And so that's the fun part about, from a chemist standpoint.
I was gonna say.
It has both properties of that ester, and so it's when we ran the 50% in, the engine guys hated me because it doesn't have the cetane number to be able to run the EEB at 50% because of that ester side of things. But yeah, the cloud point, not an issue. So that's why going to butox is, you're going to increase the temperature. It's still minus. I mean, it's not going to be, but it is at least I don't know if we'll ever get to 50%. I don't, with this, just because, again, the cetane, because that ester is pulling that down. The ether's pulling it up. The ester's pulling it down. But we should have a strong 10, 20, 30%.
Thank you.
And like I said, it did not separate. And the EEB blended with gasoline also. It was a sweet spot molecule that did both products. So.
I I actually have a financial question, even though I'm a scientist. In your
No,
white
that's,
paper here-
you've got to think on this in financial numbers. here.
Right, right. In your white paper, you have a graph that shows that without the California credits, the production costs would be 2 to 3 times greater than they are with the credits. With the credits, it's equivalent to pretty much other types of fuels. What you don't show is comparisons to other biofuels. So I want to understand, what are the risks associated with these credits? Is there a sunset date on some of this? How is that?
So the renewable fuel, so the graph that you're referring to it's both RFS, so the federal, and the LCSF. So first
Is it
to say that it's combined, so that RFS I can't speak. That's been a bane of whether or not it gets renewed, not renewed retroactively. There's been also, so the RFS credit is a risk, economic risk.
Mm-hmm.
LCSF credit, no. California is going down a pathway. LCSF is the pathway for removing carbon from its economy, and that credit's going to be solid.
What is the relative proportion,
Oh, of
federal versus state? Half and half, or?
ooh, that I don't LCSF is it's cap and trade based, so it fluctuates and it's going up. RFS I think is a stable. RFS is a specific number for like biodiesel. It's $1 penny gallon. So that's in the law, but the LCSF credit, it's cap and trade based, so that fluctuates and it's going. But so there is a market issue there as far as, but
There's a huge difference in cost.
yeah.
So I'm going to cut us off there.
Oh, thank you.
Jim, thank you.